His research focuses on the philosophy of religion and philosophy of race, particularly issues in miracles and religious experience, deism, racial solidarity, and racism. He is the author of Multiverse Deism, Shifting Perspectives of God and the World, published through Lexington Press, and another book titled Racist, Not Racist, Anti-Racist, Language and the Dynamic Disaster of American Racism, and many articles in peer-reviewed journals and edited anthologies. He is the editor of The Crisis of American Democracy, Essays on Failing Institution, and is the series editor of the Philosophy of Race series at Vernon Press. Dr. Harper grew up in East Vancouver and received, this is one of the most exciting details, I think, from his bio, that he is a KPU alum. So he received his BA from KPU, an MA in philosophy from Toronto Metropolitan University, and a PhD in philosophy from the University of Birmingham. He's currently editing 2 forthcoming volumes, the first on the intersections of race and communication, and the second on the future of race in Canada. And the title of his today's presentation is An Interdisciplinary Approach to Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So over to you, Leland.
Great. Thank you, Asma, and thank you, everybody, for joining. You can leave your cameras on, turn them off, whatever you feel most comfortable with. I've talked at plenty of blank screens, so I think I'm getting used to it. But I'll also take the facial cues and reactions and stuff as well if you want to share them. So yeah, thank you for taking some time out of, I assume, everybody's busy schedules to listen to me talk for a little bit. I really appreciate it. I know everybody has a lot of stuff going on, so I'm always appreciative when faculty and staff and students and anybody can take a little bit of time to listen to some of the things I have to say. I hope to have a little bit of dialogue, so I'll kind of share a little bit of what I've been working on, what I plan on continuing to work on over the next little while, how it pertains to KPU in particular, and we can see, what maybe comes out of that. So I'll start by sharing my presentation, which I think is loading now. Loading my slides. There we go. So we should be able to see that. Can I get a head nod? Yes, wonderful.
Yeah, all good.
Wonderful. So as Asma said, my presentation today is titled An Interdisciplinary Approach to Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. I'll start off with this quick quote, right? It says, since the beginning of this year, so 2024, state lawmakers have introduced at least 39 bills meant to eliminate or restrict higher education's diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in 19 states. So this comes from the Chronicle of Higher Education. Of course, this is going to be, when we're talking about states, we're talking about the United States of America. And this data goes back a couple months, but we're quickly seeing these rollouts of, at least in higher education, and a little more broadly now, these rollbacks of these commitments that were made to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, largely in 2020. So I think one of the most recent ones was Walmart announced a couple days ago. They were rolling back a lot of their DEI efforts. So that's just something that's kind of been ongoing for the past little while, and something that I like to keep in the back of my head. So in light of that, right, some of the things that I want to talk about, one of these things that we identified a need for, and I'll get into the who we is in a little bit, but some of the things we identified a need for are programs related to an understanding of and appreciation for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion beyond compliance, right? So we, at least the algorithms that I somehow have triggered in my computer searches and Instagram searches and that kind of stuff, I'm constantly getting inundated with things from Cornell University or Stanford graduate education saying, come get your certificate or your diploma or something or other in diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Pay your $4,000, we'll do 12 hours of work and you'll get your little thing that you can put on LinkedIn, right? So at least I see those every day. Some of you probably see those or are familiar with those kinds of things as well. What we found is that I've had the opportunity through a grant to actually enroll in some of these and take some of these courses and get some of these certificates. And what I found is that a lot of these certificates are based on compliance, right? And so what I mean when I say compliance is that they're basically teaching you how to not get sued, teaching you how to not lose customers or clients or students, if we're talking about higher education. If we want to talk about an interpersonal relationship, I'd like to put it as how to not get punched in the face for being too racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, whatever it is, right? So I think we can do a little better than that, right? I think that's a pretty low bar to set when we're talking about things related to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, right? I don't want people buying into not being racist just so they don't get sued, right? I think that's a pretty low bar. So that was one of the things I found. We also found that it's higher education has been shifting, right? If you're in higher education, you've kind of noticed this over the past probably decade or so. But there's this function that higher education plays for career prep as well, right? There's less on-the-job training. It's more that our students, our graduating students, are coming out and they're being expected to have certain skills. One of these skills that has now shifted from being a soft skill to a hard skill is some idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So they can frame that. It can be framed in any number of ways. I typically frame it as knowing how to work well with others. I think that's a big component of it, or understanding others, working with folks who are different than you. But that's quickly becoming a hard skill as well. And we see this, if we're across a range of industries where you have to submit, for example, a diversity statement when you're applying for a job, just along with your cover letter, right? You have to put in your cover letter, your resume, your references, and your diversity statement or something along those lines. So it's becoming more commonplace. Right. Another thing is if you're in higher education, you understand that we always need courses that are reflecting student interest and demand. Right. So as much as we want to think we're not a business and we don't care about money and we just want to be concerned with the ideas and the pursuit of truth and all these kinds of things, right? Those things still cost money. We still need to get grants. We still need to get funding. We still need to have students. And of course, we want to have courses that are going to reflect students' interests. We want enrollment in our courses. And this is something that came out in speaking to different students, is that they want to be able to have some of these conversations related to, at its very basis, identity, right? A lot of students and a lot of just people in general have questions about identity or thoughts about identity, different demographics, that kind of stuff. And they maybe haven't been afforded the opportunity to talk about it in kind of a controlled, informed manner, right? We see these kind of echo chambers. We see these things going back and forth on Twitter and Instagram and whatever else people are on, TikTok, these kinds of things. And that's often where we get the conclusion, right? It's folks stating their conclusion, not necessarily all the underlying stuff that we want to be able to get at through dialogue, through reading, through interpersonal experiences, right? So that's something that students have been asking for. Also, we talk about more interdisciplinary courses. I think, again, higher education is shifting to understand that we can't just identify or address certain issues in our silos, right? We're not just going to be, not everything is just a philosophical issue. Not anything is just a sociological issue or a business issue or a fine arts issue, right? There's going to be these through lines. There's going to be these things that kind of bleed out. And so we need to break down some of these silos and really lean on the expertise of all the folks that we have around us to try to address some of these bigger issues, right? So one of the examples I like to use here, and this is, I'm a sports guy, so I try to, I kind of fall back on sports examples quite often, but if we want to look at the WNBA, for example, right? If we want to look at, maybe the pay structure, right? We've seen probably discussions about how underpaid most WNBA superstars are. You have your top tier ones who are making a few $100,000 in their salary, but most of them are a vast majority of them are making between kind of 65 and 110,000 per year, something in that neighborhood. Okay, well, let's have a discussion on that. But that's not going to be confined to business. It's not going to be confined to sports management, right? We can address those issues from a justice perspective, right? Is it an issue in compensatory justice? We can address it from an ethics perspective, right? Is it ethical that we consume this product and only pay these women X amount of dollars in comparison to what we pay the men, right? We can look at it from sociology. We can look at it from marketing. We can look at it from all these different angles. And so that just goes to show how one kind of very simple singular thing, which is the pay structure of WNBA players, can be informed by and impact a number of different schools of thought, a number of different disciplines, right? So we want to be able to bring all those disciplines together, or maybe not all of them, but some of them at least, more than one, right? And then lastly is this integration of experiential learning, particularly in humanities-based courses, right? So we've seen experiential learning through a number of different disciplines. So we see it in business, we see it in social work, all these kinds of places, but typically humanities is one that lacks or that lags behind a little bit in terms of incorporating experiential or place-based learning. If you're like me and you went through getting a degree in humanities, right? I did whatever 10 plus years in the humanities in my schooling, and most of it was read this thing, write about this thing, right? That was kind of the extent of it. It was never really kind of take this and go apply it somewhere, or try to bring it out to the world, or think about it in different ways, right? A lot of it was, for the most part, like I said, read this thing that's a few hundred years old, interpret it, and then write a new thing about it, which is great, has its purpose, has its function, but that's not the only way that we want to start to use some of these concepts, some of these theories that we learn, right? And there's a demand for students to, again, have stuff that they can put on their resume saying, I've done this, I want to be able to get a job, and I have this hard skill that I have done, I have evidence of having done this thing. So we want to be able to get that experiential learning component in there. And for all the education folks out there, right, there's all sorts of data out there that says that experiential learning is just a better way of teaching, for any number of reasons. It may not be reflected in the course evaluations that your students get, because there's also a correlation there saying that typically those students rank or scores the faculty lower on the course evals, but when it comes to information retention, they've actually learned more, whether they know it or not, or recognize it or not. And so when I'm talking about the team of folks that we had to start thinking about this was funded through the National Endowment for the Humanities, a study that we did a few years ago. And the team, I won't go into too much detail, but it consisted of philosophers, a historian, literature professor, business and marketing professor, DEI professionals, so folks who work in social work or with backgrounds in social work, education, sociology, an HR and experiential learning specialist, an educational designer, right? We had all sorts of these folks come together and work on the different proposals and different course content design and all that kind of stuff to figure out what would work best for students, how we could take some of these theories that are in all of our disciplines, bring them together and make them of value and interesting to students. And so this is a structure that got spit out, that we settled on, right? So we have our JEDI 101, which is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, just our simple introduction class that most of us will be familiar with, any kind of intro class where we're doing some very basic level setting, right? What do the acronyms mean? What's the difference between equality and equity? What are some different accounts of racism or sexism or homophobia, right? Those kinds of things. And it's more going to be that solid theoretical grounding of a lot of the concepts across a number of different disciplines that are integrated into this. The second in the structure is JEDI 201, which is Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Integrated Studies, right? And so here we start to bring in case studies. We start to pull from, in most cases, the business discipline and start using case studies to say, okay, well, like we just talked about Walmart a little bit, right? So Walmart has decided to roll back their programs related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. What are the consequences of that, right? Did it hinder their ability to recruit and retain staff? Did it maybe improve their ability to recruit and retain staff? Did it hurt their numbers at all, right? These kinds of things. Did it hurt their publicity, right? These kinds of things we can look at from any number of areas, right? Then we have an approved elective, which is any identified upper level course that has a focus on some components of identity and or justice. So there's, at any university, there's a range of them. But here we have stuff, at least for this one, we have things like Asian history or women in religion, right? Those kinds of courses that address some some component related to identity. And then the final one is JEDI 480, which is Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, Practical Application. And here's where it gets a little bit different, right? So what we do is we spend the first little bit of the course dealing with content from folks who work in the DEI space. So this is going to be your professional practitioners. So your consultants, your VPs of DEI or JEDI or EDI, however the acronym works at that particular organization, those kinds of folks. And it's going to be things like, what have they seen in their experience in the workplace? What are the things they're doing on their day-to-day basis, right? And so we'll read a little bit of that. And then students go out into the world. We place them into somewhere that is connected to what they want to pursue. So one example is I just had a student, he's actually in the process of completing this course right now. His goal is to be president. He wants to be president of the United States. And so what we did is we set him up with a local campaign. So he worked with a gentleman who was running for county commissioner, and he had the ability to work within that campaign office. And he was focused on looking at how certain messages may be crafted to better speak to different demographics of voters. Right. So that was his thing that he looked at there. And now he's in the final stages of that. So he's completed that component. And what he's doing now is doing a final report, doing a comparative analysis of how these approaches have been applied at federal level campaigns versus on state and local level campaigns. So that's what he's working on right now. Similarly, I have a student next semester. She's interested in law. She's going to go work at the county courts for a little bit. She's going to go work with a family lawyer for a little bit. She's going to be kind of moved around to give her a taste of how issues related to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion impact all these different spheres of the legal system. So that's what she's going to be doing. Similarly, if you're an education student, maybe we'll send you to a school district, figure out why maybe it's predominantly young girls of color who are being suspended versus young men of color or non-racialized folks or something of that nature. And what they'll do is they'll work with their kind of on-site supervisor and be able to get those skills and go through real life practical kind of implementation of some of the concepts we've been looking at over the previous 3 courses that they've been doing. So that's the structure of that. And the thing that differentiates this a little bit from some of the other things that we're seeing in this space is that this is a certificate that is designed and available to degree-seeking undergraduate students. All right. So as I mentioned, these things kind of available through eCornell or the Stanford Graduate School of Business, right? Those are typically going to be professional development or some are available in kind of continuing education formats. But what this is designed to do is to pair and tack onto whatever that student's major is or their minor or their minor, and just be broadly available to these undergraduate students. And it's something that goes onto their transcript as a completed micro-credential. So again, it'll give employers, it'll give other folks the opportunity to see that, hey, this is a student that has some familiarity with these concepts or with these topics. And so as I was doing a little bit more research on this last week, we're starting to see an influx of programs similar to this crop up around Canada. So I saw at Ontario Tech, they have a DEI in education component, right? So for those education students, they can pick to specialize in a stream and focus a little bit more heavily on, equitable education in the K-12 system, for example. At York University and George Brown College and UBC, all similar type things, but largely in the continuing education side of things. So it's a little bit different than what we typically are looking for when we're looking for 4-credit courses for an undergraduate who is seeking their degree. And so here's the progress that we've made so far with this program that launched in fall of 2023 down in Michigan. It's at Siena Heights University. So as of the launch date, we've had to double the number of sections that have been offered. We had our schedule for what we plan to offer and when we plan to offer it. But there's been such demand from the university or from students that we've had to double the number of sections offered. We've had to accelerate the speed of the rollout because there's a number of students who were going to graduate, but wanted to have this on their transcript. They wanted to finish this before they graduated. So that's why I'm running some classes a little bit faster or a little bit earlier than I normally would have. We've had to offer courses in multiple modalities. Of course, some students want asynchronous, some students want online, some students want hybrid, some students want face-to-face. So we've had to offer each of these courses in multiple modalities to be able to get the best learning outcome and the best teaching experience for these students. We've also established a JEDI student award. And so what that does is, it's very simple. It's just, the eligibility criteria is that you're a student, you've taken one of these courses that academic year, and you're doing something either on campus or in the community that deals with justice, equity, diversity, and or inclusion. So our inaugural winner of this award, she's a young woman on the field hockey team, I believe. Maybe it's not, I don't know, some team, softball team. And what she's been doing, she's been engaged in a project to try to get food that would otherwise go to waste from our school's cafeteria and have it sent over to local shelters and stuff in the community so that the food isn't just wasted. So that's the kind of thing that she's been working on. Just recently, I had a group of students out of nowhere, surprisingly, want to establish a JEDI club. They understand the value of this stuff and they want to see more stuff related to it on campus. So they've been working together recently with our Black Student Union to try to create more diverse and equitable food offerings in our university dining hall. So that kind of stuff. These are the things they're trying to work on. They're bringing speakers to campus, all those kinds of things. And then, as we've gone through, we've established partnerships with Lenaway Now, so that's a media company, the YMCA, Plain Wave Instruments, which is an engineering firm, United Way, the Detroit Pistons, Michigan International Speedway. So all these different community partners that we've entered into agreements with that we will send these students to for their kind of practical application components. So they're kind of mini internship is kind of how I frame it. And so here's the relevance, or the horizon and the relevance of this to KPU, this program that I've established at another university, right? So the horizon is integrating this with existing majors, right? We've talked about how it's supposed to be paired with other majors, other minors, that kind of thing, right? For those of us who are in humanities, or probably the arts generally speaking, right? We're not typically a destination major for a lot of folks, right? We don't necessarily lead directly to a high-paying job, right? So we have to kind of weasel our way in there a little bit. And one of the ways of doing this is by partnering up with some of those more popular degrees. So business, for example, or at this university, we have exercise science. A lot of folks are very interested in exercise science. So how can some of these JEDI principles be relevant to an exercise science program, right? There's any number of ways. And so we try to build that integration. Same thing with education, with healthcare, with nursing. We have pre-med students as well. So there's plenty of integrations there. We want to start adding more place-based learning, right? In addition to just this placement that comes in that capstone course, right? We want to start building in field trips for those who are able to go. We want to start building in study abroad components, right? Those kinds of things. So we're not just reading about, this culture or these different places or how things are done elsewhere. We're going to do it. We're going to live it for a little bit. And trying to figure out funding for those kinds of things for the students who may not have the socioeconomic tools to help them, take advantage of some of those opportunities. Right? We're also looking at the integration of a social action component, right? So for those students who may not necessarily want to go be placed in a organization, maybe there's a particular cause that they're very interested in. And so we'll learn a little bit about, how do you write a press release? How do you empower students to understand that they can make a difference in their communities or more broadly in the world, right? So how do we write a press release? How do we get cameras down for something? How do we table for things? How do we get these students to understand that they do have a voice and most people want to hear that voice? And so that's another component that we're looking at adding. Opportunities for professional development, of course, if we're doing a lot of stuff related to identity, a lot of the stuff we're doing will probably be relevant to faculty as well. So how can faculty start to take some of these principles and maybe inject them into their courses, right? So how do we maybe start to think about creating more just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive course structure? So maybe it's looking at how do I make my course more equitable without having to spend 15 hours revamping my whole course syllabus, right? Most of us, if we're faculty, are going to be reluctant to do that for a number of reasons, mostly just because it's a lot of work. But what's some low-hanging fruit, some low lift, heavy yield or heavy impact stuff that we can do to try to get our courses to where they want to be? We have a dynamic political climate, right? I work in Michigan, or well, this was implemented in Michigan, and Donald Trump just got elected. And so this is where we're seeing a lot of these anti-DEI bills coming in across. They're coming in at the state level, but right, he's even spoken about providing reparations to white folks who were harmed by DEI practices, right? So there's all sorts of stuff to navigate there. New university president in Michigan. We just got a new university president who is whatever I'll say. He's hostile to this stuff. And I know KPU is about to get a new president, or is undergoing that search. I think it just started, if I'm thinking correctly. But in the near future, there will be a new president. So who knows how that will go. And then, of course, shifting student demographics, right? Right now, students want this, but is it something that they're going to, that might change a little bit down the road? And especially in the Canadian landscape, where we're seeing the legislation change based on how many international students we allow into the country, right? We've already seen how that's impacting universities across the country. Is that going to be a long-term thing? Is it going to be extended past the first initial couple of years? What's that going to look like? And so these are things that we want to think about, and how it can be relevant to KPU, because the program, as I've designed it, is built for a very different demographic than the kind of demographic that we see at KPU. And so there's a few considerations to think about. This one, it was a really interesting program at Colorado College, and what they did is they set up a program. I'll just read the quote here. It says, "Haven is a response to an immediate need for those in harm's way, and I am proud that CC, Colorado College, is acting out our commitment to anti-racism in such a meaningful manner." And that comes from Rosalie Rodriguez, their Associate Vice President of Institutional Equity and Belonging. And so what this program is they've offered, I don't remember the specific details off the top of my head, but I think it's they're accepting all transfer credits and guaranteeing housing for up to 2 years for any students who are looking to leave a state that has implemented a statewide DEI ban. So it's kind of creating a safe haven for those students. And I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Rodriguez maybe about 6 months ago about this project, or this plan. And she says it's working really well. She said they're getting interest from across the country. They're expanding their student base. They're expanding their housing. Right. She said right now the problem that they are potentially running into is that they may run out of on-campus housing for students who want to come to Colorado College now. And she said, listen, if that's the problem we have, we will gladly take that problem. Because we'll create partnerships out in the community. We'll build more residence halls. We'll do what we need to do. But if our problem is that more students want to come here than we have physical space to accommodate, I'm sure any university would gladly take that problem. And so that was very interesting to hear. And if you don't know about the political climate of Colorado, and particularly in Colorado Springs, it's really interesting. I won't go into it here, but you can look it up. And then also, right, again, going back to Donald Trump's recent election, right? The Canadian government's immigration website see traffic spike after Donald Trump's election, right? This happened after his previous election. It happened now. It's happening now, or did happen a couple of weeks ago. And so it's interesting to see that, what that means. Are we going to have folks who are trying to come up to our country because they see us more as a safe haven? Maybe, maybe not, right? I would argue we're not necessarily a safe haven, but that's other research that will be coming out shortly. Sponsored by the 0.6 Fund, so that's also great. But these are all things to consider as we kind of think about implementing this kind of micro-credential at KPU in particular. And so what's next for KPU as we start to think about some of these things, right? In my particular role, I'm going to be working on a proposal development for this kind of micro-credential, right? As it's designed right now, it's 12 credits. We would be making it a 15 credit thing at KPU. So that's the proposal I'll be looking at. And so I'll be working in spring of 2025 to shore up that proposal and what it looks like. And so part of that will be, community listening sessions, talking to the KPU community. So students, faculty, staff, admin, community members about, what expertise already exists in the community that we can maybe draw from to make this the best possible learning experience for our students. And then, of course, as with anything else, find the money to make it happen, right? So it's going to be, me keeping an eye on possibly external grants and those kinds of things, and I don't know, maybe putting pressure on some administrators to buck up some money if and when the time comes. So that's kind of what's in the future, at least the next maybe 6 months or so for this work that I'm doing as it pertains to KPU. So that's all I have to share today. I just want to thank you, and I guess we can open it up for questions, comments, discussion. My email address is there in case you maybe don't feel comfortable asking your question, or you want to refine it a little bit or share your feedback in a not so public manner. But I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. So that's there, and I'll, I think, turn it over to Holly. Is that right? To moderate, or is Asma doing it?
I think it might be. Is Asma still here? Yeah, she is. So I might as well turn back over.
Yeah, no, I'm here today. It was last week that we had a conflict. Yeah. So thanks so much, Leland, for this wonderful presentation. And there's so much to talk about, especially in the context of recent political changes, but also anticipated political changes here in Canada as well. So, meaning I can have a long conversation with you, but I think that I'm going to open it to people here for comments, questions, and then if there is time, then I'll ask you my questions. Yeah, open to everyone. Mark.
So yes, I'll jump in and get things started. Hi, Leland. Thanks for the presentation. My name is Mark. I teach in the criminology department here at KPU. What a fabulous initiative. It looks amazing. I was looking at the website. Was it Sienna Heights while you were talking, and kind of digging into it a little bit there. It looks like an amazing initiative. I have a question. Not so much a question, but I just want to connect with you around micro-credentials as an approach. This term, I became a Climate Plus Challenge Fellow, and it's a one-term course release. The Climate Plus Challenge has been around for several years, sponsored by the Provost's office, and there's kind of a rolling cadre of folks who participate. One of the things that we've been looking at is credentialing, including micro-credentials. So that's something that I've sort of been exploring. So I was busily scribbling notes when you were talking about the framework and how it kind of works. And yeah, I would just love to know if you have established yet already kind of like a community of others at KPU who are looking at micro-credentials as a potential approach, because there's so many kind of options when it comes to credentialing, including like a certificate. But one of the things, as you mentioned about the micro-credentials, is that becomes available to students while they're still a student, right? So they can get that and be out there in the workforce while still a student before they've graduated, and they can say, I've got this, specialization in EDI or whatever it may be. So really, I just wanted to connect with you to say, like, going forward, I think just thinking about the pragmatics and the mechanics, excuse me, of putting together a micro-credential at KPU, that's something that I'd like to talk with you more about at a future date. But I guess the question would be, have you discovered or formed a community of others who are taking this approach for other substantive topics?
Yeah, excuse me. I haven't yet kind of formed that community. I know those conversations are taking place around campus, and to be honest, I'm just too new here to really know all those conversations that are taking place. And I've typically kind of focused more on the content than the kind of I guess the fitting of it within the broader curriculum at KPU. I think I kind of leave that to the deans to help me navigate that a little bit. But yes, I'm certainly more than happy to talk with you about that. I'll be getting a little bit deeper, or a lot deeper into it come January, once I get through kind of all my grading and everything, in terms of structure and what other folks have been doing at KPU, what maybe has worked broadly in Canada or BC, or what hasn't worked, and that kind of stuff. And of course, taking guidance from the higher ups as well.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I can just send you an email and we can follow up offline, and I can share with you what I've learned as well. And yeah, can connect later. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Mark, if we may just add, Leland, if you don't mind, what we are developing right now is a citation. So it will be what he mentioned was like these 5 courses that will be developed. So we initially had thought of developing a certificate which requires 10 courses. So currently the easiest way to move forward is to develop a citation. And so that is what the proposal that Leland is developing is for a citation. And this is collaboratively funded and supported through Faculty of Arts and the Office of Equity. So once this citation, and I think for this DEI citation in particular, I think he's going to be able to transfer a lot of the content from his existing work to this. And once it's developed, I think, and that's where some of these, I think, Leland, it might be a good idea to then think about whether we could also draw out micro credentials from that citation, right? So it's a great point, Mark. Thanks for bringing that up. Cool. Any other questions, comments? Yeah. Holly.
Hi, Leland.
Hi, Holly.
So I guess this is just kind of a general question for both you and Asma. As far as from the humanities faculty at KPU and the other arts faculty, are there ways that we can help you in this project and supporting the development of this?
Yeah, I'm sure there are. I haven't really thought about the specifics yet. Okay. But I think for me, it's going to be learning who's interested in what, who has specializations in what, and how that can apply to what it is we're trying to create here. Obviously, everybody has their own specializations or areas of expertise, and trying to, for lack of a better term, prioritize certain things. It's tricky, right? If we're only playing with 15 credits here. We're only playing with, I don't know, what's the math on that? How many weeks? I don't do math, so whatever, how many weeks that is, right? We're trying to deal with some pretty big topics in not a ton of time. And so what I will be doing as we get a little bit closer is trying to figure out, even maybe some best teaching practices for some of this stuff that maybe I haven't dealt with. Figure out, how do we assess some of these outcomes for students, right? We're trying to get away, right? As much as we want to decolonize certain things, we're still in a colonized institution. It's just the structure of it is such that we have to do certain things, but how can we maybe get away from some of that a little bit? So I would love to hear just kind of open dialogue really about what some other folks are doing in terms of assessment, course planning, anything and everything that might relate. So
I'm happy to talk to you about that more later for the philosophy department specifically.
Sounds great.
Jeffrey?
Oh, hi, Leland. That was a really good talk. I'm so glad that I was able to hear it. My name's Jeff Myers. I'm a colleague, like Mark, in the criminology department. And so I guess a couple of things. First thing I just want to mention to you in terms of synergies that may be helpful is I sit on the decolonization and indigenization committee for our department. And so, you know, there's some intersection between that work and anti-racist work and DEI work, at least we're allied, you know, on these projects. So some of the things we've been doing is working through and thinking about how to change our course plans and outlines in order to not so much to not provide a kind of, you know, our assessment mode and teaching mode be totally, you know, hegemonic and Western and hierarchical and traditional, but working within the boundaries that, as you say, the institution sets, we still have to examine people and grade them, blah, blah, blah. So you and I can talk offline. Definitely reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
The other piece of it, though, that I'm wanted to just kind of sort of ask you about a little bit is where it intersects with my own research interests, because my research interests are as a kind of legal and political theorist. I sort of started out as a constitutional theorist and a critical one at that. So one of the things that's really interesting to me right now is mis and disinformation and propaganda as it relates to questions like critical race theory or DEI, which have become catchphrases in a kind of highly ideological, form of politics, which has had massive tectonic effects, right?
Yeah.
And I've been kind of influenced by, I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work. I think you probably are. I have his book here. Olufemi Otaiwo, who wrote about, elite capture. And kind of, as I understand it, one of his thesis is that during our kind of neoliberal period, you know, we easily, you know, the corporate world easily and higher education metastasize certain basic ideas about anti-racism and DEI as good for business, if you will.
Yeah.
But then once the ideological winds change, those commitments showed to be relatively thin, or they just were purely in the form of representation and made a lot of people cynical also, right? And that may have something to do with the current environment we're in. So I'm coming to a question, but I want to say that I like what you do, Leland, because what you're doing is you seem to be building some infrastructure for DEI and for anti-racist work of the sort you're doing that's going to be resistant to and train people to continue doing this work, even where it's not necessarily appended to, you know, public institutions or corporations. And that, who knows, in the end, that might permit a certain radicalization. But I guess the question I'm asking you is, as part of your work, have you begun to prepare students who are working in this field and who are doing this kind of micro-credential potentially to how they can effectuate, you know, meaningful, discourse in their own communities, but even with those who disagree with them, how they can enter into this kind of morass of mis and disinformation to help give out good information and to potentially move the ball along in that sort of civil discourse, or I mean, if that's still possible. I'm wondering if that's part of what you do and how you've thought about that, Leland. And thank you for being patient with me, because I know I talk a lot.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think one of the things I have to also concern myself with is not stepping on toes of stuff that maybe will be part of this curriculum versus stuff that's already being done by other folks and that kind of stuff as well. So that comes to mind as well. But I mean, I think one of the very simple things to kind of getting past this dis and misinformation component, I think a lot of that just comes in the kind of 101 course, or I guess it would be 1100 at KPU, but just simple definitions of things. Like, it's very simple. Like, this is the difference between sex and gender. This is what critical race theory actually is. These are, you know, we can't necessarily define race. Well, people have tried to define racism. There's, of course, different accounts, but here's the different accounts of what it means for something to be considered racist, or someone, or an institution, right? So we can look at those things. And I think once students really have an understanding, we're not talking past each other anymore, right? We have to get that solid foundation. And that's the first step in having any of this meaningful discourse. And what I've found is that a lot of students have, right? I don't just get students who buy into this stuff, or buy in, whatever, however you want to take that. But I have students that they disagree with a lot of the stuff that I'm putting out there, or that I'm saying, or they're like, we shouldn't have to read this. This is crap, all that kind of stuff. But they're learning a little bit more about why some people think the way they do. and they're starting to think through things through this lens of maybe different things that they haven't thought about before. So different ways that race or gender, sexuality, socioeconomic status, right, all those kinds of things, immigration status, can factor into how we move through the world. And I think for me, right, one of the things in designing this, we have to be very careful and very, particularly in the States, be very clear that we're staying away from this word called indoctrination, right? That's what everybody's worried about, is that everybody's trying to get indoctrinated. I don't tell these students to think anything. I say, hey, here's a personal narrative of an Indigenous man from 1940, and here's what he has to say. Let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about the poem that he wrote, right? Those kinds of things. And why do you think he may have said what he said here? And what do you think the implications of this is, right? It's not me saying any of, you need to think this, and this is why we're reading this, because you need to think X, Y, Z, or you need to do X, Y, Z. It's really just presenting the material to the students, hopefully developing their critical thinking, getting them to see through some different perspectives, and then moving forward. And I don't want to say there's necessarily a right place that I want them to end up, but I think they're generally ending up at the right place, is what I've found so far. In terms of facilitating or actuating change, that's still something we've still kind of just gotten to that practical application component. So I've only seen a few of those, but I think it's going to be highly dependent on what the students want to do, right? I try to give the students as much autonomy as possible. So if some of them want to stay, they want to try to, actuate change by being theorists, great. Like, by all means, go to grad school, write some papers, write some books, do what you need to do. If you want to drop out immediately after taking my class or any class, and go just start working in the community and trying to organize people, by all means, do that too. And I try to work with each student really on an individual level, to give them what it is they need, and to try to tailor, as we get to those higher level courses, to tailor the content so it's more applicable to them and what they're trying to do and what their aims are. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but it's kind of, I think that's probably as much as I'm comfortable saying confidently at the moment.
Pedro?
Hi, Leland. Thank you so much for sharing. I teach in the Educational Studies department, and we do have a course on social justice and diversity in educational settings. And many of the ideas that you shared with us, they resonate with me particularly, and the content of the course. So I think I'll touch base with you later, because there's a lot of synergy, just like Jeffrey was saying, and I would like to know how we can contribute, but also the interdisciplinarity of the work that you are proposing. I think that this is really interesting, and I don't know how, because Asma said that you're working on the citation now. I don't know how that is going to be played into a micro credential, but one other thing is, how can what population are we thinking? Because although you mentioned the change in the demographic, we still have a lot of international students, and they do benefit from courses like this, and they are interested in these topics. And many of these international students are just taking a 2-year diploma or a certificate, right? So I don't know if you are considering that as well, to add not only to BAs, but also to diplomas then. Yeah, but then thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think that's the international student component is something that I really have to. That's going to take a lot of thought, I think, on my part, and anybody else who's involved with this, in trying to maybe account for different levels of entry, I guess, or pre-existing knowledge bases, or expectations of what they're getting into, right? Those kinds of things, and it's going to be different than what I've already designed. So I think that's going to be one of the bigger things to address, to get everybody kind of on the same page within a few weeks of the first course, so then we can then kind of move forward. But and you know, even though that's one of the difficulties, I think that's also one of the exciting parts. And I'm sure we've all found this in our teaching as well, is that, you know, we, as cliche as it is, and we've all heard this, we learn just as much from the students as they learn from us, or if not more. But I think, especially in these kinds of courses, right, I want the lived experience of these students to come out, right? Even, you know, stupid little things like, I'm a little bit older now, so my movie references don't quite work like they used to, right? Okay, bring in, what movie did you see? How does this relate? What shows are you watching? What did you recently see? These kinds of things. How is your experience going through high school in COVID going to impact, you know, some of these things as you move forward, right? It's going to be completely different than what I've experienced or what you've experienced. And so I think we need to, you know, there's this level of discomfort probably that we have as instructors going into the unknown and maybe relinquishing control a little bit, but maybe leaning, but I like being able to, I'm getting better at leaning into that, particularly in these courses. And so that's what I'm most excited about. It's the, like I said, the challenge, but also the exciting part.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, we have a couple more minutes. So I'll jump in here, Leland. I'm just thinking, and of course, you know, as we work on this citation, meaning a number of, so some of the questions that have been raised right now, I think those are interesting because they'll allow us to kind of, you know, steer the direction of the citation, because our hope is that eventually we can move, the citation is the first step, and then a certificate, and then a diploma, and we can hope that this can become a minor or a major at some point. But of course, we have to take it one step at a time. And as the citation is developed, I think some of these questions that are being raised now and then during the public consults that will happen next term, we'll hear more about you know, these kinds of questions. So I think that's pretty exciting. And at the same time, Leland, I'm wondering, of course, I'm saying this while we have already decided to develop this program, that how do you feel about more and more universities developing this program, students taking this, and then this becoming a sort of a, you know, a go-to thing, a buzzword, being able to say, I have a DEI certificate, so I am now an expert in this area. And the risk that comes with some of the people who will be taking this, of course, there's the allyship, but then there is also this risk of people without lived experiences taking some of these courses and then feeling that they can talk with the same level of understanding and expertise as, say, people with lived experience, right? Like, so if somebody has a certification in anti-racism but does not have the lived experience of being racialized, how do we navigate that? Like, what do you think about that? Because one of the discussions that is on, especially among EDI administrators right now, is about, you know, are we now going to see PhDs in EDI, and does that make somebody with a PhD in EDI more informed than somebody who has got, you know, so much trauma having lived as a say a racialized person? So how do we navigate that? I was thinking, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, as Melinda says in the chat, they have a PhD, so we automatically defer to them on everything because they're the experts. But I think there's a few things to think about there, right? So I think as more institutions come out with these sorts of things, you know, you run the risk of having it be, you know, that kind of buzzword or just a marketing thing, or right, these kinds of things that you've addressed. I think we're past that already. That's already the case. Like I said, I've taken some of these things that are, you know, a few weeks on your own, do it at your own pace online, give us our $4,500. You get your little certificate thing spit out, and they're garbage, right? They're marketing things. It's their money grabs. They're garbage. I don't, and there's other ones that I'm sure are doing great things. And I think for our purposes here, you know, it's going to be to do it the right way, right? I think it's as simple as that. Maintain our individual and institutional integrity, do the things that we need to do to provide our students and broader communities and society in general with what we think is going to be important and valuable and useful to them. In terms of, the non-racialized person now becoming the expert on racialized, that's nothing new either. We see all these people who are experts in Egyptology and East Asian studies and all this kind of stuff, who have zero lived experience in that, right? I actually watched one Netflix documentary and it was all about, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I was like, how come every Black studies professor is a white person in this documentary? What is going on here, right? So that happens. That's a thing. But what I like to, what I like to think about here is that hopefully, if students have gone through at least that first course, they will start to understand that this idea that there are other perspectives and that it's okay to not be an expert in everything and that we all have expertise in our own lived experience, right? And so even when I'm dealing with this kind of thing with external organizations, right, my go-to is embrace humility, right? It's, you don't need to know everything. And we've all had, if we're educators, right, we've all had that student who takes the first year class, takes the one class, and now thinks they know more than the professor because they got a B+ on their first paper. Okay, that's not how it works, right? You're gonna get those. But the idea is that that's gonna be something that we are actively gonna talk about in these courses, right? We're going to talk about things like cultural appropriation. We're going to talk about things like epistemic injustice. We're going to talk about who gets credibility and why. Historically, what has been the case? How is it going to be moving forward, right? Those are conversations that we are going to have, right? And I think one of the ways of talking about that is, ask your students who the smartest person they know is, right? I think a lot of them, or the smartest person in their lives is, right? It's probably not going to be the person with the PhD. We all know people with PhDs who are idiots, right? Right. My most knowledgeable people in my life, my grandfather, right? Very limited schooling, right? Maybe finish high school. I'm not even sure, but he's one of the smartest people I know, right? And so it's trying to kind of shift that narrative of what we consider valuable information, who we consider to be experts, right? Those kinds of things, and breaking down those barriers. And I think that's one of the very first steps that hopefully students kind of start getting, and will get away from that. I took JEDI 101, so I'm an expert in anti-racism, because we see that, unfortunately, and it's just trying to quell that as much as we can.
Great. Thank you so much, Leland. That's all the time we have. We are actually over time. And I'm sure that we could continue this discussion for a few more hours, which I guess we will do next term as we launch some of the public consultations. So everybody in the room, again, please be on the lookout for those consultation invites that will come out as this citation is developed. But thanks a lot. Wonderful conversations. Good to see you all. And thanks again, Leland, for an excellent talk and the follow-up conversation. Good to see you all.
Thank you.